You look in the mirror one morning and something feels different. The light hits your scalp just a little harder than it used to. The brush seems to collect more strands. And a quiet thought begins to grow in the back of your mind. Is this just how it ends after 75? Before you accept that idea, stay with me, because what you're about to understand may completely change how you see hair thinning at this stage of life. Yes, thinning hair after 75 is common, but no, it is not simply old age switching something off. Inside your body, small biological shifts have been happening slowly for decades. None of them dramatic, none of them sudden, but together they influence how your hair behaves. Every single strand on your head grows from a follicle, a tiny structure beneath the skin that works like a miniature factory. This factory needs oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and steady blood flow to function properly. According to the National Institutes of Health, hair follicles move through repeating cycles, a growth phase called anagen, a transition phase called catagen, and a resting or shedding phase called telogen. When you're younger, the growth phase lasts longer, hair grows thicker, and stays anchored longer. But with age, that growth window gradually shortens. The strand sheds sooner, it grows back finer. This is a biological adjustment, not a personal failure. Research shared through Harvard Health explains that aging affects cell turnover and protein synthesis. Hair is made primarily of keratin, a structural protein. Producing keratin requires enough dietary protein and an efficient metabolism. After 75, appetite often decreases. Digestion may not be as strong. Total calorie intake can drop without you even noticing. And when protein intake falls, the body follows a strict survival hierarchy. Your brain, your heart, your immune system, they come first. Hair does not. From a survival perspective, hair is non-essential. So when nutrients are limited, the follicle factory slows down before vital organs do. This is one reason thinning can accelerate during illness, weight loss, or periods of low appetite. The body is protecting what matters most. Circulation is another major piece of the puzzle. Your scalp depends on steady blood flow to deliver oxygen and nutrients to each follicle. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention notes that cardiovascular efficiency naturally changes with age, especially if daily movement declines. Even subtle reductions in blood flow can affect tissues that regenerate quickly, and hair follicles are among the most metabolically active structures in the body. Think of it like a garden receiving slightly less water. Growth doesn't stop overnight, but it becomes less vigorous. Hormones also shift over time. The National Institutes of Health and other medical sources describe how changes in androgen levels and sensitivity to those hormones can gradually shrink follicles. Smaller follicles produce finer strands. Add chronic stress to the equation, and the impact becomes clearer. The World Health Organization and the Mayo Clinic both discuss how prolonged stress elevates cortisol, which influences inflammatory processes throughout the body. Hair follicles are highly sensitive to inflammation. Persistent stress can push more hairs into the resting phase prematurely. And then there's sleep. Deep sleep is when tissue repair increases and growth-related hormones are regulated. Yet poor sleep becomes more common with age. According to Harvard Health, disrupted sleep can subtly interfere with hormone balance and cellular recovery. Hair follicles, which depend on consistent repair signals, feel that shift. Many people assume genetics are the only cause. Others rely heavily on harsh topical treatments that irritate the scalp. But genetics are just one factor in a much larger system involving protein intake, blood flow, stress levels, sleep quality, and metabolic efficiency. When you understand that, something powerful happens. Thinning hair stops looking like an unavoidable ending and starts looking like a reflection of deeper internal changes. And that realization brings us to one of the most overlooked drivers of hair health after 75. Protein, not just how much you eat, but how your body uses it. Protein may be the most underestimated factor in hair thinning after 75, not because people ignore it on purpose, but because the changes are subtle. Appetite slowly declines. Meals become lighter. Breakfast turns into toast and tea. Lunch becomes smaller. And without realizing it, daily protein intake drops below what the body truly needs. Hair is built from keratin, and keratin is built from amino acids. If amino acids are limited, production slows. It's that simple and that biological. The Mayo Clinic notes that many older adults experience reduced appetite, changes in taste, dental discomfort, or digestive shifts that unintentionally lower protein consumption. Even small deficits, repeated daily, can influence muscle preservation, tissue repair, and yes, hair growth. The National Institutes of Health explains that aging is associated with something called anabolic resistance. This means the body becomes less efficient at using dietary protein to build and repair tissues. In younger years, a modest protein intake easily stimulates tissue synthesis. After 75, the body often requires more consistent intake to trigger the same response. Now here's where it becomes important for your hair. If the body needs slightly more consistent protein stimulation but receives slightly less than optimal amounts, the hair follicle quietly adjusts. It shifts into the resting phase sooner, strands grow thinner, shedding becomes more noticeable. Not because something is wrong, but because resources are being reallocated. And remember the hierarchy: brain, heart, immune system first, hair last. The NHS highlights another overlooked factor: distribution. Many seniors consume most of their protein at dinner, while breakfast and lunch remain very light. From a metabolic perspective, this uneven pattern may not optimally stimulate protein synthesis throughout the day. Hair follicles don't benefit from one large surge of amino acids at night. They rely on steady availability. Consistency matters more than occasional excess. Digestion also changes with age. Stomach acid production can decline. Absorption efficiency may shift. This makes nutrient pairing important. Protein does not work alone. It depends on supportive micronutrients. According to Harvard Health, vitamins such as B12 and D, along with minerals like zinc and iron, contribute to tissue maintenance and cellular function. Iron supports oxygen transport. Without adequate oxygen, rapidly dividing cells in hair follicles struggle to function efficiently. Zinc plays a role in cellular repair. Inadequate intake has been associated with increased shedding in clinical observations indexed in PubMed research. Even mild deficiencies, not severe enough to cause dramatic symptoms, can gradually influence hair cycling. A common mistake is focusing on one superprotein while ignoring overall dietary diversity. Eggs are excellent, fish is valuable, legumes contribute plant-based amino acids, dairy, nuts, seeds, and whole foods each offer slightly different nutrient profiles. Diversity strengthens the overall amino acid spectrum available for keratin production. Another mistake is aggressively reducing calories to manage weight without protecting nutrient density. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and Mayo Clinic both emphasize that maintaining adequate protein during aging is essential for preserving lean tissue and supporting recovery. Hair follicles, while not vital for survival, are still metabolically active tissues. They reflect nutritional patterns quickly. Stress complicates this further. The World Health Organization has described how chronic stress influences metabolic processes. When the body remains in prolonged stress mode, protein breakdown can increase. Repair processes become secondary. This means even adequate intake may not be fully utilized if lifestyle stressors are consistently high. So protein is not just about quantity. It's about timing, distribution, absorption, variety, and the body's ability to use what it receives. And this is where many conversations take an interesting turn. When people talk about protein for hair, they immediately think of eggs or meat. And while those are complete, high-quality sources, there's another layer to consider: not raw protein grams, but how certain foods support the environment in which protein is used. Because sometimes the question isn't which food contains the most protein. Sometimes the real question is, which foods help your body use that protein more effectively? And that's exactly where an unexpected food, one that surprises many people, begins to enter the conversation. When people think about strengthening hair, the conversation usually stops at one question: where can I get the most protein? Eggs often top the list, and rightly so. They are considered a complete, high-quality protein source because they contain all essential amino acids in substantial amounts. But here's where things get more interesting. Hair health isn't determined by protein quantity alone. It's shaped by how well your body delivers, protects, and uses those nutrients once they're inside you. And this is where certain whole foods, including avocado enter the discussion in a very different way. Let's be clear, no fruit contains more measurable protein than eggs. That isn't the comparison that matters. The real discussion centers on functional synergy, how nutrients within whole foods work together to support circulation, cellular stability, and nutrient absorption in ways that indirectly influence tissues like hair. Avocado contains modest amounts of protein. Not dramatic, not headline-worthy. But it also provides monounsaturated fats, vitamin E, folate, potassium, and small amounts of biotin. According to Harvard Health, monounsaturated fats support cardiovascular health when consumed as part of a balanced diet. And cardiovascular health matters more than most people realize when it comes to hair. Hair follicles rely on consistent blood flow. Protein provides the building blocks for keratin. But without healthy circulation, those building blocks don't efficiently reach the follicle. In that sense, fats that support vascular function help create the environment where amino acids can actually be delivered. It's not about replacing protein, it's about supporting its journey. Vitamin E adds another layer. The National Institutes of Health describes vitamin E as an antioxidant that protects cells from oxidative stress, the accumulation of unstable molecules that can damage tissues over time. Hair follicles are metabolically active structures. That activity makes them sensitive to oxidative stress. Antioxidants do not reverse aging, but they contribute to cellular stability. Research indexed in PubMed has explored connections between oxidative stress and certain shedding patterns, suggesting that reducing internal cellular strain may help maintain healthier growth cycles. Then there's biotin, often marketed aggressively in hair supplements. The National Institutes of Health notes that true biotin deficiency is rare, but when it does occur, hair thinning can result. Whole foods like avocado provide balanced amounts within a natural nutrient matrix. That distinction matters. Whole foods deliver nutrients in proportions the body recognizes and regulates more efficiently than isolated megadoses. This brings us to an often overlooked concept: nutrient absorption. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble. Without dietary fat, absorption efficiency declines. The Cleveland Clinic explains that dietary fats are essential for transporting and storing certain vitamins. If someone eats nutrient-dense vegetables but avoids healthy fats entirely, they may not fully absorb those micronutrients. Including natural fat sources alongside plant foods can enhance utilization, indirectly supporting tissues dependent on consistent nutrient delivery, including hair follicles. One common mistake among older adults is eliminating fats due to outdated fears. Current guidance from organizations like Harvard Health and the American Heart Association distinguishes clearly between harmful trans fats and beneficial unsaturated fats. Removing all fats can reduce caloric intake and impair absorption, potentially weakening overall nutritional status. Hydration adds yet another dimension. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention highlights that older adults often experience a diminished thirst response. Nutrients travel through the bloodstream in a fluid medium. Without adequate hydration, nutrient delivery efficiency may decline. Amino acids, antioxidants, and oxygen all depend on circulation, and circulation depends on fluid balance. So when discussing foods like avocado, the value is not about outperforming eggs in raw protein grams. It's about contributing to a supportive internal environment, one that enhances circulation, protects cells from oxidative stress, and improves nutrient absorption. Hair growth reflects the condition of that entire system. And that system depends heavily on one central network, the one that delivers every nutrient, every oxygen molecule, every signal to the follicle: blood flow. And once you understand how circulation shapes hair health after 75, the picture becomes even clearer. If nutrition provides the building materials for your hair, circulation is the delivery system. And without an efficient delivery network, even the best nutrients never fully reach their destination. Every hair follicle is a metabolically active structure. It requires oxygen, glucose, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals to sustain the growth phase of its cycle. According to the National Institutes of Health, hair follicles continuously rotate through 3 stages: anagen, the growth phase; catagen, the transition phase; and telogen, the resting phase. For the growth phase to continue effectively, follicular cells must divide rapidly, and rapid cell division requires energy which depends directly on oxygen and nutrient supply. That supply arrives through tiny blood vessels surrounding each follicle. As we age, cardiovascular efficiency gradually changes. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention explains that reduced physical activity over time can contribute to decreased vascular flexibility and slower peripheral circulation. This does not mean something is dramatically wrong. It means the system becomes slightly less responsive. And hair follicles are often among the first tissues to reflect that subtle shift. The scalp is richly supplied with blood vessels, but it still depends on overall cardiovascular health. If circulation becomes even modestly less efficient, oxygen delivery may decline just enough to shorten the growth phase. The body always prioritizes vital organs. When resources feel limited, it directs energy toward the brain and heart first, not toward sustaining thick hair growth. This is why daily movement matters more than many realize. Both the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention consistently recommend regular, moderate physical activity to support heart and vascular health. Walking, gentle aerobic exercise, and light stretching encourage improved blood flow throughout the body. When heart rate increases slightly, circulation to peripheral tissues, including the scalp, improves. Better circulation means better delivery of amino acids from protein, better transport of iron and zinc, more efficient oxygen supply. Hair follicles depend on that steady flow. Blood pressure regulation also plays a role. The Mayo Clinic explains that unmanaged high blood pressure can gradually affect vessel integrity. Healthy blood vessels remain flexible and responsive. They adjust to deliver blood where it's needed, but stiff or narrowed vessels may not respond as efficiently. Maintaining vascular flexibility through balanced nutrition, stress management, and regular movement indirectly supports follicle health. Hydration strengthens this entire system. Blood plasma is largely composed of water. Adequate hydration supports healthy blood volume and nutrient transport. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention notes that older adults often experience a reduced thirst response, which increases the risk of mild dehydration. Even mild dehydration can slightly reduce plasma volume, potentially limiting nutrient transport efficiency. Every nutrient your hair needs travels through this circulatory network. Stress influences it too. The World Health Organization describes how chronic stress elevates cortisol levels. Elevated cortisol can influence vascular tone and inflammatory processes. Under stress, blood vessels may temporarily constrict. While short-term stress responses are normal, prolonged activation may subtly influence peripheral blood flow. Research indexed in PubMed has explored links between stress-related hormonal shifts and telogen effluvium, a condition where more follicles prematurely enter the resting phase, increasing shedding. Circulation, hormones, inflammation, they are interconnected. One common mistake is focusing only on topical treatments. While scalp massage may temporarily increase local blood flow, long-term vascular health depends on whole-body habits. Without consistent movement, hydration, and stress regulation, external solutions alone cannot fully address the internal delivery system. Understanding circulation reframes the conversation. Hair thinning after 75 is rarely caused by one isolated factor. It reflects systemic efficiency, how well oxygen, amino acids, antioxidants, and hormonal signals move through the body. And that brings us to something even deeper. Because even with strong nutrition and solid circulation, one powerful regulator can quietly shift the entire hair growth cycle. Sleep and the hormones that rise and fall while you rest. You can eat well, you can stay active, you can hydrate properly, but if your sleep is fragmented night after night, the internal repair system your hair depends on never fully activates. Hair growth is not constant. It follows biological rhythms. According to the National Institutes of Health, the body operates on circadian patterns that regulate hormone release, immune signaling, and cellular repair. These rhythms are not optional. They are built into your physiology. During deeper stages of sleep, especially slow-wave sleep, the body increases production of growth hormone. Growth hormone supports tissue repair and cellular regeneration. While often discussed in relation to muscle and bone, it also plays a role in maintaining rapidly dividing cells, including those inside hair follicles. If sleep becomes shortened or repeatedly interrupted, that repair window narrows. Over time, the impact accumulates. The Harvard Health emphasizes that sleep influences nearly every endocrine process in the body. Cortisol, melatonin, and growth hormone follow predictable cycles when sleep is consistent. Melatonin, released in darkness, not only regulates sleep timing but also functions as an antioxidant. Research indexed in PubMed has explored melatonin's potential role in supporting hair follicle cycling, suggesting that stable circadian rhythms may contribute to maintaining normal growth phases. While this research is still developing, it reinforces one essential truth: biological timing matters. Chronic stress adds another layer to this nighttime equation. The World Health Organization and Mayo Clinic both describe how prolonged stress elevates cortisol levels. Cortisol is necessary for short-term survival responses, but when levels remain elevated for extended periods, immune signaling and inflammatory pathways shift. Hair follicles are highly sensitive to inflammatory signals. Elevated stress has been associated with telogen effluvium, a condition where a larger number of follicles shift prematurely into the resting phase, leading to noticeable shedding. The Cleveland Clinic explains that this type of shedding can be triggered by illness, emotional stress, major life events, or persistent sleep disruption. Stress also affects blood vessels. Under sympathetic nervous system activation, blood vessels constrict temporarily. This response is protective in acute situations, but if the stress response remains chronically activated, peripheral circulation may be subtly influenced. As referenced in cardiovascular discussions from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, long-term stress can impact vascular health and blood pressure regulation. And as we've already discussed, hair follicles depend on consistent oxygen and nutrient delivery. One of the most underestimated contributors to sleep disruption today is late-night screen exposure. Blue light from digital devices can suppress melatonin production, a point frequently highlighted in sleep research cited by Harvard Health. Reduced melatonin not only interferes with sleep timing but may also affect nighttime antioxidant support. Sleep duration matters just as much as sleep quality. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends that older adults aim for roughly 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. Consistently sleeping fewer hours can impair glucose regulation, immune resilience, and tissue repair. Since hair follicles are among the most metabolically active mini-organs in the body, they respond quickly to systemic metabolic stress. A common mistake is underestimating the cumulative effect of low-grade, persistent stress. Many adults over 75 face ongoing stressors, health concerns, financial adjustments, caregiving roles, or social isolation. Each stressor alone may seem manageable, but together they create sustained hormonal pressure. Supporting sleep quality does not require extreme measures. Consistent bedtimes, reduced evening caffeine, limiting late-night screen exposure, creating a dark, quiet environment, gentle breathing exercises, or stretching before bed. Research discussed in NIH-supported literature suggests these practices help stabilize cortisol patterns and support hormonal balance. Hair growth reflects that internal stability. When sleep is consistent and stress is regulated, hormonal rhythms align, cellular repair improves, inflammatory signaling stabilizes. Over time, the hair growth cycle becomes less disrupted. But here's something important to understand. Even when you correct nutrition, circulation, sleep, and stress, visible change does not happen overnight, because hair operates on a cycle measured in months, not days. This is the part most people struggle with. You improve your meals, you increase protein consistency, you walk more, you hydrate intentionally, you protect your sleep, and then you look in the mirror 2 weeks later expecting visible change. But hair does not operate on a 2-week timeline. According to the National Institutes of Health, hair follicles cycle through phases that last months, not days. The anagen, or growth phase, can last several years earlier in life but gradually shortens with age. When supportive habits are introduced, follicles don't instantly reverse direction. They must complete their current cycle before new growth patterns become visible. This biological pacing is why impatience often leads to frustration. Even when the internal environment improves, better protein distribution, improved circulation, stabilized stress hormones, follicles that have already shifted into the resting phase must complete telogen before re-entering growth. That process takes time. Visible density changes may not appear for several months. Understanding this timeline prevents one of the most common mistakes: abandoning consistent habits too early. The Mayo Clinic frequently emphasizes that sustainable physiological change depends on long-term patterns, not short-term adjustments. Extreme dieting, sudden supplement overuse, or rapid lifestyle overhauls often disrupt balance rather than restore it. Hair follicles respond best to stability. Another mistake is chasing isolated solutions while ignoring underlying medical factors. Thyroid disorders, iron deficiency, medication side effects, and certain chronic conditions can all influence hair patterns. The National Institutes of Health notes that metabolic and hormonal shifts associated with aging may interact with these conditions. Hair thinning is sometimes a signal not of aging alone, but of something that deserves evaluation. This is why educational information should never replace individualized medical guidance. Consulting a qualified healthcare professional before making major dietary or supplement changes is especially important after 75, particularly when chronic conditions or prescription medications are involved. But for many individuals, the bigger issue is not a dramatic deficiency or disease, it's cumulative imbalance. Slightly lower protein intake, slightly reduced circulation, slightly fragmented sleep, slightly elevated stress, slightly inconsistent hydration. Each factor alone may seem minor. Together, over years, they influence the internal environment that hair follicles depend on. The Harvard Health consistently highlights that whole dietary patterns, not single nutrients, correlate with stronger long-term outcomes. The same principle applies to hair. Balanced meals with distributed protein intake, healthy unsaturated fats that support vascular function, micronutrients like zinc, iron, vitamin D, and B12 obtained through diverse foods, regular moderate movement to enhance circulation, adequate hydration to support nutrient transport, stable sleep routines to regulate cortisol and growth hormone. None of these are dramatic interventions, but together they create systemic stability, and hair reflects systemic stability. It's also important to recognize that hair density naturally changes with age, even under ideal conditions. The goal is not to recreate hair patterns from decades earlier. The goal is to support the healthiest possible growth cycle within your current physiology. When daily habits consistently align with nutritional adequacy, cardiovascular support, hormonal rhythm, and stress regulation, the body gradually shifts toward balance. Follicles that are capable of active growth respond to that environment over time. And that brings us to the final piece of the picture, the understanding that hair after 75 is not an isolated cosmetic issue. It is a visible reflection of how well the entire system is supported. When you see it that way, the approach becomes clearer and far more empowering. By now, you can see the pattern. Hair after 75 is not controlled by one single switch. It is not determined by one food, one vitamin, one shampoo, or even one genetic trait. It reflects the combined rhythm of nutrition, circulation, hormonal balance, recovery, hydration, and stress resilience. The body operates as an interconnected system, and hair follicles respond to that system. According to the National Institutes of Health, aging influences protein metabolism, vascular function, and cellular turnover, all processes that directly affect tissues with high growth rates. Hair belongs to that category. When internal balance shifts, follicles adjust their cycling patterns. Protein remains foundational. Guidance from the Mayo Clinic and the NHS emphasizes the importance of consistent, evenly distributed protein intake throughout the day in older adults. Hair follicles require amino acids to produce keratin. Without adequate supply, the body prioritizes essential organs over cosmetic tissues, including a variety of sources: legumes, dairy, fish, eggs, nuts, seeds, and nutrient-dense plant foods, supports a broader amino acid and micronutrient profile. As frequently highlighted by Harvard Health, Whole dietary patterns matter more than isolated nutrients. Balanced eating supports not just hair, but muscle integrity, immune strength, and metabolic stability. Circulation forms the next layer. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and World Health Organization consistently emphasize regular, moderate movement as a pillar of cardiovascular health. Walking, light aerobic activity, and gentle strength work enhance blood flow, improving oxygen and nutrient delivery to peripheral tissues, including the scalp. Hydration strengthens that delivery network. Because blood plasma depends heavily on water, adequate fluid intake supports nutrient transport efficiency. And as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention notes, reduced thirst sensitivity in older adults makes intentional hydration especially important. Sleep and stress regulation complete the system. Consistent sleep supports cortisol balance and growth hormone release, both of which influence tissue repair. The Harvard Health and Mayo Clinic have repeatedly outlined how disrupted sleep and chronic stress alter inflammatory pathways and metabolic stability. Research indexed in PubMed has associated prolonged stress with temporary shedding conditions like telogen, effluvium, reinforcing the connection between systemic stress and hair behavior. One critical point often overlooked is timing. The National Institutes of Health explains that hair growth cycles unfold over months. Even when supportive habits are introduced, follicles require time to complete their phases before visible improvements appear. Patience is not optional, it is biologically required. Another important reminder, hair thinning can sometimes signal underlying medical conditions such as thyroid imbalance, nutritional deficiencies, or medication effects. Educational guidance supports awareness, but individualized medical advice should always come from a qualified healthcare professional. When nutrition, movement, hydration, sleep, and stress management align consistently, not perfectly, but consistently, they create an internal environment that supports stability. Hair becomes one visible reflection of that broader physiological balance. So when you look in the mirror and notice change, pause before assuming it's simply the end of the story. It may be your body's quiet way of asking for deeper support. If this explanation helped you see hair health from a clearer, more informed perspective, take a moment to support the channel. Like this video, share it with someone who might benefit, and subscribe for more evidence-based insights that connect everyday habits to long-term well-being. Your support helps us continue bringing you clear, research-backed guidance, and it ensures you don't miss the next conversation that could make a real difference.